Sometimes we get a wake-up call that changes the direction of our lives. That is what happened to my guest today. In 2003, she was on the brink of death and given a 3% chance of survival. But against all odds, she didn't just survive, she thrived and now has a fulfilling life and successful career helping others unlock their potential. Hello and welcome to Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Welcome to Bobbi Kahler. We are so happy to have you today. Bobbi is an entrepreneur, speaker, author, podcast host, and a successful life coach who works with Fortune 500 companies as well as everyday people just trying to find their power and live a better life. Bobbi, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on your show.
We just used up all our time with your resume. That was it.
We're done.
I know, right? So, I mean, what a story you have, really on the brink of death years ago. So how did that happen? Tell us what happened and what led you to what you're doing today.
Okay. So how it happened is I had started my business in 2000 and it was going pretty well. 2001, my husband, boyfriend at the time, his name's Rick, now my husband, we decided to move to Portland, Oregon from Chicago, started a new business. 2 weeks later, September 11th happened. There was a lot of stress, classic entrepreneur. I was working too hard. I wasn't paying attention to my body, the signs it was giving me. I was getting fatigued, but I wasn't listening. I was just push through it. And eventually it caught up to me. And it was, I've had many doctors since that time say, I don't even know how you're alive, and it turned out it was my adrenals. I went from healthy because I was always an athlete. So I was a runner and all this kind of stuff, but I ignored everything for too long. And it just went into a total adrenal collapse. And I'm incredibly lucky.
That is amazing.
To be alive.
How did you get through that? How long were you in the hospital? What happened?
I was never hospitalized because I remember I went to a research hospital and they're like, well, this is what we think you have. There's not much we can do for you.
Oh, and my goodness.
Yeah, it was really just, doing our own research, really looking at nutrition, that type of thing. The whole thing from that point to total return to health, and I mean health and fitness, was 10 years. But there's two big chapters. The first chapter was, how do I get to the point where I'm no longer not sick, right? And that took 5 years, a little bit more than 5 years. So that was a long struggle. And then actually, this was one of the lowest points in the whole journey. Once I got the clean bill of health, I'm like, okay, well, I should be back to running. I should be back to doing my weights and all this kind of stuff. And I was not really healthy. And I'm like, God, there's a big difference between being sick and really being healthy.
Yes, there is.
Because a huge difference, right? I lost all my strength, all my endurance. I remember, Robin, this was my lowest point. I went to, after I got my clean bill of health, I went to a gym. I was walking on the treadmill. And now keep in mind, before getting sick, I could run 8 miles in under an hour, right? That's pretty decent. Not gonna win any gold medals, but that's pretty decent.
That's pretty darn good. Yes.
Pretty darn good. And my heart rate was always good. I had a good resting heart rate. So I go to the gym and I'm walking on the treadmill. I walked a 30-minute mile.
Wow.
And my heart rate was at 170.
So, wow, you needed to do some work. Yes.
I had a long way to go. And I got off the treadmill and I was just like so brokenhearted because I'm like, oh my God, this is such a big hill. But it was like, you know what? That's just where you are today.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start taking the steps that will lead you to where you want to go? And I think that's how I survived it. Was always thinking about, okay, that's just where I am today.
Yes.
What are the next steps I can take? And then turning those things into actions that I consistently take until they become habits and I don't have to think about it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. How much of that was your inner strength? I don't know what you call it, divine intervention. Where did that come from?
I'm a pretty determined person. I have a very strong sense of self-efficacy. But here's the thing. That wasn't the first adversity that I'd faced. And so I think it really goes back to one of my core stories about myself. Because when I was 5, a speech pathologist evaluated my speech and he called my mom and he's like, hey, she's never going to talk correctly. Like, this is going to be a lifelong disability. This is how bad it is. And my mom, she just, when she heard that, she said, yeah, whatever. And then she told me and she's like, but we're not going to listen to him. because you never let someone else tell you what you can or cannot do.
Mm.
And then she worked with me. And so part of my core story is find the actions that you need to take and take the actions, and you can get the results you want. Because that's what I started doing when I was a kid. So in some ways, this is something I'd learned from a very early age.
Something that you've always been doing. And you said you've
Yeah.
discovered 3 fundamental truths.
Yeah.
What are they?
Yeah. So, and this comes from, I grew up very humbly, right? I picked blackberries in high school so I could buy my own school clothes. Actually, I had to buy the material to make my own school clothes. So, and I didn't get to go to college right out of high school because my parents didn't believe in it. So I had to pay for my own way. So at one point I realized as I was at a really low point, and I realized, you know what? The first fundamental truth is that the future can be changed. It doesn't matter where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
The future can be changed. This is just my current story. The second fundamental truth is that I can change my future. I don't have to wait for someone else. I don't have to wait to be rescued. And I think I was 23 when I had that realization. And I really think that was one of my big traps. I was waiting for someone else to show up and say, here, let me pay for you to go to college. You know what? That was never going to happen. I had to figure that out for myself, So that's the second fundamental truth, that we can change our own future. And the third thing is that we don't have to wait. Right? I've coached more than 3,000 people at this point in my life. One thing I can promise you is that we do not have to wait. Whatever we need to learn, whoever we need to become, we can learn it, right? There's no magic formula. The magic formula is get started and learn what you need to learn.
Well, that's really funny you should say that because, my husband always laughs when he decided he just had to drop a few pounds and he just started that day. He's like,
Yeah.
people wait till Monday. Why do they wait till Monday?
Just
Start now, and it's just a funny thing people do that. Or I'm starting after the summer. He's like, if you want to make a change, make the change, get going.
That's
And
right.
that is so true, but you have to find something. There's got to be something inside you. When people quit smoking, they go on a diet, they do whatever the change is, there's something that triggers them inside. How do you pull that out of people?
Yeah, because you're right. It comes from inside, and it's part of our identity. Either who do we believe ourselves to be, or who do we want to become? So when the doctor said to me, and this is not a joke, when he said to me, Bobbi, you have a 3% chance of a full recovery, my very first question back was, when can I go running again? And he just looked at me. He said, you might have to accept that your days of being an athlete are over. And I thought, no, I have always been an athlete. I will always be an athlete. I don't know how right now. So, but see, that was part of my identity. I
Yes.
am an athlete. So what would an athlete do? And like when I told you the story about, the treadmill and a 30-minute mile, it's like, doesn't matter. If I'm an athlete, what does an athlete do? How do they act? How do they eat? How do they treat their bodies? And I think that's what pulls us forward when we can tap into that. And sometimes I'll tell you at the beginning, it's a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, that's true because people have a certain view of themselves, the way they grew up, or maybe what somebody told them, that's ridiculous. You can never do that, those types of things. And that plays like a reel in your head.
Continually.
Yeah.
And here's the downside is our brain is always talking to us. Someone likened it to like a crazy sports, and I love sports. So this like a crazy sportscaster that's just shouting all this stuff. It doesn't care if it's real or not. So we have to take control of the stories that we tell ourselves, and as far as like getting started, I'm reading Atomic Habits by James Clear. Fabulous book. I cannot recommend that book enough. He talks about it as every action we take is a vote for the person that we want to become.
I love that. That's a
Isn't
great
that
way to
powerful?
look at it. Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Great way to look at it.
Yeah. So are these actions going to lead me to where I want to go, or are they leading me in the wrong direction?
And what do you hear people talk about the most? Where do they feel stuck? Is it relationships? Is it a job? Is it all over the board?
It's all over the board. I think a lot of it, though, comes back to we're stuck in our minds. What do we believe about ourselves? Right? Because if we believe, for example, if we believe that nobody listens to us, right? If that's part of our story, how do we show up when we're interacting with people? We probably don't prepare. right? We might not speak up because we think, well, no one's going to listen to me anyway. And so we act into that, versus if we think people listen to me, we're probably going to prepare for meetings or presentations. We think that people want to listen to us, so our presence is different and we get a different result. So
Self-fulfilling prophecy, right?
Completely.
Exactly.
So we get stuck in our stories. So, and that's why it's so important that we pay attention to what is the story that I'm telling myself at any given time.
Well, I have to, I play tennis and I
Oh,
call
I love it.
myself more names. And I said, if I talk to a friend the way I talk to myself, I would never be friends with me because
That's right.
it's terrible.
You
Yes.
would kick her off the court.
Yes, exactly. So, and I'm working on that because I'm like, all right, come on. Maybe you're having a bad day. You know, you're not a bad person just because you can't hit the ball.
Anyone can have a bad day.
Exactly. Exactly. So what do you find holds most people back? Is it that belief, or is it somebody else, or is it both, or all of it?
It can be all of it.
Mhm.
But even if it's external, even if it is someone else, because I know I've been in bad relationships, specifically one, but I can't blame him for any of my missteps during that time. Ultimately, it comes back to me.
Yes.
So I think that is one of the biggest blocks that people face. And then in conjunction with that, we block ourselves from taking action, right? Nothing happens without action because we can't learn if we don't take action. We don't grow if we don't take action. We don't bring in new insights if we don't take action. So we get in our heads and that blocks us. And
Yes.
I call it the just wait voice, because it's that voice that's like, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but you're just about to do something new and it's like, well, is today the best day? Maybe you should wait. Maybe you should wait till tomorrow. Well, what will happen if you fail? What if you make a mistake? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. That voice is there to keep us safe. It's the brain's way of trying to keep us safe. Everybody has it. The key is to say, thank you. And I'm going forward anyway.
Exactly.
And take the action.
And you not only mentioned fear of failure, but there's also, in my mind, fear of success, getting what you want and having it maybe not be what you thought it would be, or, realizing that it, wasn't really the place you were meant to be. Do you ever have people feel that way?
I think there's that. And the other part of the fear of success is, what will those closest to me think?
Yes.
Right? If I really do this, will they still love me? Will they still like me? Will I still be part of the tribe? All that kind of stuff. And I think there is that. Well, what if I dedicate myself to it and I do reach success, to your point, and then I don't like it? Well, start again.
Find something else. Yes,
find
exactly.
something else. You're not gonna lose by starting.
Where do you start with your clients? So you work with a lot of people virtually, I'm assuming, because we're all in that world now. And what's the first step? How do you actually, I'm sure you talk with them and you get an overview, but how do you really figure out which direction they want to go?
Yeah, it starts with, and this is where a lot of people go awry. A lot of people start with, what do I not like? Don't start there. If you take nothing else from this, do not start there. When we do that, we're working against the brains. We're working against neuroscience, right? So we want to start with a vision of, you can call it your ideal self, your ideal future, but that vision of, who do I and what do I want to become? And that's not fast work, but there's a couple different ways to go about that. Journaling is big, right? You can write about it. You can start by doing an inventory of what your innate strengths and values are, because that's probably part of who your ideal self would be. What's really helpful for me, because there's a lot of questions like, you had the magic wand question and these types of things, and those work for some people. For some people, they don't. What works better for me, my husband and I did this back in 2009. We created a vision board. And it starts by clipping out pictures of or taking pictures, but clipping any picture that really is like, ooh, yeah. Like for me back in 2009, I was still recovering, but I clipped pictures of people biking, of people running, these fit looking people. And that was part of my ideal self. I want to become that. And so the vision board was great. And we collected all these over like a period of 2 to 3 weeks. And then we put them on, remember the cork bulletin
Oh,
boards. So we
sure.
hung them
Yeah.
all up,
We all had them in
and
college.
that's right. And
Yeah.
you hang all these pictures up, and then you start to make sense of, okay, oh, here's a theme. Here's a theme. We got it down to 5, and we took a step back, and my husband's like, you know what we're really doing here? We're creating the life we love to live every day. And it was just this thing that pulled us forward. So that's one of
I've
my
heard of
favorite
that
ways.
before, and I
Oh,
always
it's
like, does that
powerful.
really work? Come
Oh,
on, but
huge. Oh,
I could see how that would because first of all, it's in your face. You see it all
yeah,
the time, so it makes you think about it. I always tell my daughter this: don't live your life like a cork bobbing on the ocean. I always say to
that's
her,
right.
she's only 17, she's got a ways to go, and when you're that age, you sort of whatever comes my
Yeah.
way. You're not really thinking it out. But I think as we get a little older and more mature and start to realize, like, what direction do we want our lives to go? You don't want to be that cork bobbing on the ocean.
No.
Although there are people who do live their lives like that. They just kind of float and go, and they don't really stop and think where they want to go, what they want to do. It's kind of like they
No.
just fell into things. And
Yeah,
sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not.
that's right. I think about it this way, like really work to master your own life. And I think a lot of us dabble,
Yeah. Yes.
you know, and it's funny. The thing about the vision board, it really does work. And because it triggers your brain differently. The funny story behind that is I took a neuroscience class, and this was in college. I'm like, okay, if I'm taking neuroscience, I need something easier. So
I need
I took
basket weaving or
yeah,
something.
I took an art therapy class at the same time because I'm like, well, that would be good. I learned so much in that art therapy class. And that's where I learned about the vision board and why it works with our brain. So it's like, wow, I learned so much in that class. And it was really just I need something easy to go with the neuroscience.
I love that. That is great. And that probably could be a little bit more effective than some things you learned in
Yeah.
neuroscience class.
Yeah.
I know. So what is it that you have achieved with people? Give us some success stories. Like what is something that someone came to you and said, I want this, and they end up getting it and it worked?
Okay. So, and sometimes they don't always know exactly what they want.
Well, that's another question I had. How do you always know? Yes.
Yeah.
How do you
Right.
know?
So okay. So here's an example. And this is not uncommon. So I'll kind of generalize it a little bit. So sometimes people will come to me and they're like, I'm really having trouble with a situation at work, or I want to have more life balance. And those are real, right? What often happens is that by going through this work, they discover a deeper level of meaning or purpose that then they're like, ooh, that's what I want to pursue. So I've actually had people that I've coached, and it comes out, and it's funny how much this comes out. They're like, what? I really love helping people. I love teaching people. I love coaching people. And one person made a totally different career choice, left a very successful career to say, I'm going to school and I'm becoming, she's a career coach, and she loves it, and she's successful at it. So there's a lot of different things, that can happen when you enter into the coaching relationship.
Hmm.
Some people are like, and I've done a lot of coaching in the sales world. I've done a lot of coaching with managers who will say, I want to become a better communicator. I want to become a better leader. Well, there's a lot of things that go into becoming a better leader. Communication, emotional intelligence. How are we showing up in those relationships? So it's always a journey, and you never know exactly where it's going to go. And that's part of the fun of it.
Absolutely. And do you do weekly meetings? How do you usually work it?
Um, that kind of depends. In the early stages, typically it's weekly meetings. Then we usually hit a point where it's like, okay, let's slow it down a little bit because we need more time between the sessions. Whether that's a couple weeks or maybe every 3 weeks, depending, because sometimes people have to go back and they have to do some heavy lifting in terms of journaling, in terms of thinking. Sometimes it's even talking to others around them, like interviewing others around them to get new ideas. But at the very least, I would say every 3 weeks at a minimum, maybe sometimes every 4, but it's a close relationship.
Are people willing to put in sometimes the hard work that it takes to change their lives?
A lot of times, yes, especially private clients who reach out and they say, I want to make a change. Because here's the thing, what a lot of times what that's driven by, Robin, is and I hear this so much, they'll say, I feel like I could do more, or I feel
Mm,
like there is more, or I feel like I'm playing small. Those people are usually committed. very committed. Or when the need to change, like someone faces that, we see ourselves in the mirror and we're like, oh my gosh, it's time to change. That drives commitment as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. But
Yeah.
it is tough to take that first step. I think
Oh yeah.
even in someone's unhappiness or discomfort, there is comfort in that. And that's a funny thing to say, but they find it's at least it's something they know. And
Oh
they're
yeah.
to step outside of that boundary can be really scary to people because it's the unknown.
It's the unknown. And when people are not committed, it's typically when someone's like, well, so and so said I should get a coach. That's no, it has to come from within, right? They might be right, but that just means maybe you're not ready because to your point, you have to step into there's what the comfort zone, the fear zone, learning zone, growth zone. You have to be willing to go through the fear zone.
Hmm.
And it is scary, but it's okay. It's just part of learning. It's part of growing.
Yes, that's life. That's the way life goes, you know?
It
And
is.
so, and you have a podcast,
Yes.
and that is called uh, Thriving No Matter What. Right.
Unyielded, thriving no
Unyielded.
matter.
That's it.
Yeah,
No, unyielded, thriving no matter what.
that's right.
And you have been doing this what for how long now?
Just a little bit over a year.
About over a year. Okay, same with me.
Yeah.
That's about how long I've been doing this. It's fun, isn't it? Fun to
Oh, I love
talk
it.
with people. I love it too. I enjoy it. It's like my favorite thing. This is when you say finding your passion or finding your joy in life. This is what I enjoy. I love bringing stories to people to learn about life and learn about living a better
Yeah.
life. That's my whole thing, and that's basically what you're doing as well. So
Mhm.
how is that going? Are you enjoying doing it?
I love it. And what's really funny about it too is I started it because I wanted to share people's stories.
Yes.
Because I think that's one of the best ways we learn. I've met some of the coolest people. And it's like I'll just reach out to people and on LinkedIn or whatever. I'm like, hey, I've got a podcast. Would you like to be a guest? And the vast people have said yes. The vast majority of people have said yes. If I just reached out to them and said, hey, do you want to have a cup of coffee? It'd be like, no, no.
Who are you,
Who
stalker?
are you?
Yes, right?
So you get to meet so many different people.
Yes, yes,
Oh, I
you
love
do.
it.
Me too. I really
Yeah,
do. And it's a joy to be able to do it and to bring it to other people. The behind the scenes stuff isn't so much fun, like getting
that's
it
right.
posted and doing all that. But the actual chit chat and talking is great. And you also have a book, Travels of the Heart, Developing Your Inner Leader. What is that all about?
Yeah, that came as a result back in 2010 of a project I did in school. And it is, sorry about that. It is a collection of stories and journaling activities that help people really take a inward look at who are they being as a leader and how can they become a better leader. In to be very clear, it's not about just leading a team, it's about leading yourself because we have to learn to lead ourselves first before we can lead anyone else.
Absolutely. And everybody always thinks, oh, it would be so cool to be the boss. But being the boss is not always an easy job. It's sometimes a very thankless job because you're sort of working for the people that are under you in a way.
That's right.
And you have to show up for them and you have to set the example. There's a lot that comes with it. And we've all had good and not so good bosses in our lives. And we
That's
know the
right.
difference. We know when somebody's vested and they care about their people. And I have always said in organization, it comes from the top. The way the organization shows up comes from the
Mhm.
top and it
Yeah.
sets the tone. So it's a big responsibility to lead a team.
Huge. Yeah.
Yes. To
Yeah.
motivate people. And that's a talent to be able to, well,
Mhm.
that people get sent to schools for this and, training and so forth. But I just think it has to be in your heart to do it or don't do it.
Yeah. And I think what's in your heart there is that heart to serve. Because
Yes.
that's really what leadership is about.
Yes,
It's not
it
just about
is.
telling people what to do. That's not what leadership is. It's
No,
it's
it's
really
not.
that service.
It is. It
Yeah.
definitely is, and it takes a lot of time and effort as well. So that's a great thing to be able to teach people. So if you had to just sum this up, wrap this up, what words of wisdom can you share secrets to changing your life and finding your
Mm.
purpose in life?
I think that it is all about imagining what it is you want, right? And here's a trick to that. Imagine it at least 5 years out, if not 10, right? And if you do a vision board, if you journal about it, if you know it already, great. But really connect to that and then think about what are steps that I can begin taking today that will start to lead me in that direction. Even if you fail at the steps, it's okay. You've still got that momentum going behind you. And I always think about it this way too. And this comes from being at the bottom, facing the 3% odds. I always think about it this way. Action is the antidote for despair. So when
I
we're
love
feeling
that.
hopeless, that's a time we need to take action because that will help us move forward.
That is such a great way to end this podcast. And if somebody wants to reach you, where can they find you, Bobbi?
Yeah. Easiest way is at my website, which is just bobbikahler.com. And also, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm just Bobbi Kahler there as well.
And I will put that in the show notes. And again, the podcast is called Unyielded, Thriving No Matter What, if someone wants to tune into that. And I so appreciate your time today, Bobbi Kahler. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining me for Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll let you know about our most recent episode. Hope to see you again next time. Until then, please stay safe and keep living well.